Otherwise, Karen gets mad at me because I don't send her a recording.
And don't let that happen.
Brave the movie. Where did you see God in that movie? How did the divine somehow become apparent in the midst of everything going on in that film?
I think overcoming the fear of the bear.
Overcoming the fear of the bear is right. I think that one of the biggest things that any religious tradition teaches you is that fear is not a positive thing.
Yep.
And moving somehow beyond that fear is the work of God. Right? So, but it does beg the question, doesn't it, of what is it that you're fearful of? What fear stands in your path still? And it could be not a still. It could be what stands in your path today that wasn't here a little while ago. Just a bit ago, I was with two different couples where one person in each couple had a stroke. Well, they didn't have fear of stroke to any degree up until a few months ago, when all of a sudden that hits and they have a fear in a different way than what they had, right? Because it tosses new things in front of you. So let me ask that question. What are you afraid of right now? What is it that's right now has hold of your heart in some way or another?
Getting coronavirus.
Coronavirus is a huge fear right now, isn't it?
I'm a little fearful because Ginger's not feeling 100% this morning, and I'm not sure what's going on with her. She's not wanting to climb stairs. She's trembling a lot, and so I'm just not sure what's happening with her, my little puppy.
Yeah, and that can be two different fears. That's fear of what you don't know yet, and then fear of what it's going to be once you do know.
Yeah.
And both those are tough fears, aren't they?
Yeah, and she's 11 years old now, so.
Yeah.
A spring chicken.
Right.
Jim?
Yes.
I've been dealing with a recurring sinus throat bacterial infection. And about 2 weeks ago, I thought I was finally over it. And then a few days ago, it's come back. I'm back. I'm on my third round of antibiotics now. And partly I'm saying this to let you know that I may have to go off of video and just lie down and listen in. So if that happens, that's the reason. But it's just, I wouldn't say I'm fearful, but I'm just so frustrated. And I know I've talked to people who've had these before, and I know that once you get them, it's really hard to get rid of it. But I just, want to get back to my life as it has been since we've been in this, staying at home situation. Yeah. I've had to drop the few things that have been keeping me going, and it's just hard the longer it goes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think that in some ways is what I'm fearful of, that the longer it goes, right? Whatever it is that I'm talking about, whether it's coronavirus or just a sniffly nose or whatever it happens to be, the longer it goes, the easier it is for fear to grow.
And there's, again, the Black Lives Matter thing. Now, just in the last few days, that's up again in our faces. And, I feel like good things will come of this eventually, all of this.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just hard to see that.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily that the longer it goes is bringing us to a bad thing. Because sometimes the longer it goes, it is bringing us to good, but it's the time spent in that netherland, that chaotic space, that not quite firm footing.
Yeah.
Catherine.
Well, I've got several comments, and the comments center around the importance of having filters at this time and knowing what we can handle and not handle with regard to what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And I feel overloaded at some point, but I have taken myself, I'm up in Pine Top, Lakeside at a condo, at a timeshare, and I feel the peace up here. I'm sitting in the pine trees. It's quiet. It was 57 degrees this morning, 57. It got to 60, it was 66 yesterday. We had rain. We might get more today. And I'm reminded that the city is full of noises, and I feel like there's noise pollution in Tucson, and that I have to figure out a way to get out of it much more often.
Yeah.
The other part has to do with remaining grateful and staying centered, and not to be offering suggestions, but I have found acupuncture to be very helpful. And I go to Gathering Point, which is wonderful. And Michelle is very, very loving and kind. That's on Granton, almost Granton Campbell. And she has hours daily, and she wears a mask, and she has only 3 beds available, and it's sliding fee scale. I would encourage alternatives to meditation, and maybe try acupuncture, just lovingly offered.
Thank you. By the way, while you're up there in Pine Top, tell my whole family hi.
I'll wave at everybody.
They're all family in some way or another.
Oh, good. Okay.
My family moved to the mountain in the 1870s, and so we are interrelated to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful, and I love it up here. If I could spend 3 months in the summertime here, I would do it. And I'm looking for somebody who is financially stable, who has a summer place here. I'm good company and fun, and I would love to get out of Tucson for protracted periods of time in the summertime.
Laura Greenfield, who went down to Peru with me 5 years ago, I think it was, who lives up there every summer. And I can't even remember her name. Anyway, we have a couple of St. Francis people, or connected to St. Francis, that have places up there. So
I'm going to cultivate a relationship then.
Yeah, all right, cultivate that. But let's go back to one of those places where we rarely have to have fear, and that is what Merida is going through, what we call adolescence and early teenage years, and those times when you have to differentiate from mom and dad. How many of you negotiated that time really easily? No problems, no bumps in the roads, no issues at all.
Nope. Harmony there. Nope.
Yeah, you know, it's a good time of year, but I mean, good time of life, because you really are becoming your own self. And that's what Merida was going through. She was trying to say, who am I? Not who am I defined by mom. Not who am I defined by dad. You know, this marriage, she says, is what you want. But what is it that I want? How did you have to, as you went through your life, have to define yourself outside of what somebody else wanted? Where were you, Merida, and who was your mom?
Two very different paths until after I left the house. And then we could compromise. But no, we were together.
That's right. And you know, Sandy, that's an important thing to be able to remember. It's not because you're bad or that mom and dad are bad. It's that what you're trying to do is become your own person, which sometimes means you have to leave the house, which is actually a good thing, because anybody else have one of your 20 or 30-year-olds who moved back in for a time? And it's not simple, because they need to be the adult that they are, right? And so you need that space that recognizes the adult in the other, not just whatever they used to be.
at the same time, Merida, in striking out on her own, is misled or deluded by the will of the wisp and the appeal of magic, that she can somehow magically change her mother, and discovers how mistaken she was in concluding that she could change anyone else other than herself, particularly by magic.
And mom might have needed to change. You know, at the end, Meredith looks at her mom and says, "Mom, you've changed." And mom says back, "We both have." So we all need to change. It's just when we define what that change is for the other person, that's the wrong part. So what would you have done when you were 13, 14, 15 to have changed your mom or dad? What was it you wanted them to be different about? And maybe they changed, but how many know they changed differently than what you would have thought?
You know, Jim, I was thinking a little bit earlier that sometimes it takes some kind of crisis, like in the film, it was the mother becoming unrecognizable, and then, you know, somehow we have to get her back to save her. That creates the change. And, you know, something really big that happens, or a series of things that you have to go through that brings you to that point of being able to come back together again.
Yeah, and none of us really like crises, but they aren't unimportant in our life. They definitely make it so that we have to see something different. When we're led away by the will of the wisp and we do whatever we do that damages, maybe unintentionally, but damages, and suddenly we have to rethink life. We have to see the other person differently. I think that the image of the Mordu, the bear, is important because in a very real way, when we're teenagers, we see our parents as the beast, the Mordu in our life, don't we? In some way or another. And that beast can take on a lot of different forms. But how do we get beyond just what's ugly, difficult about them, and move back to the love, both within ourselves and from them?
I think you need to look at what symbolized the rift and what was explained as the cause of the rift, and also the cure for the rift, you know, symbolized by the rent in the tapestry. And it was caused by pride, the deadliest of sins. And it was cured when that pride was recognized for the error that it was and overcome.
I love the little poem. Fate be changed.
Yeah.
Look inside. Mend the bond torn by pride. Right? And we do a really good job at making, we do a really good job of tearing things and blaming somebody else for it. Right? But how much of it can I heal my own pride, my own heart, and move back towards that other person? Because I don't know about you, but I usually wasn't very good at changing my mom. But I could change my relationship to my mom. Change myself in the midst of that. Go ahead, Doris.
My experience, I think, was a little different from what people are talking about. Um, I was always a good girl growing up. And as a teenager, I did what I was supposed to. I went to school every day. I got good grades. I didn't hang out with bad people. But where the conflict was I wanted something different with my life than what my parents wanted for me. They wanted me to excel in academics, which I did for the most part, but I just always felt like I wanted to be on a different trajectory than what they wanted for me. I wanted to be more independent. I was the oldest of 5 children, so I had a lot of home responsibilities, and I just wanted to get away and be on my own, but that was a hard thing for me to express. So I mostly didn't and just did what I was told. So ours was a more quiet distancing than a noisy, angry distancing.
Yeah, and mine was more along those lines too. My mom thought I'd be a good lawyer. And it's not that law is a bad profession or anything. It just wasn't where my heart was at. But then she can't see my heart in the same way that I can see my heart. None of us can, right? So how do we speak across that relative blindness is the hard part, right? How do I, as the child, speak my truth in the midst of whatever that parent is seen as truth? And it's not just the mom and dads of life. There's lots of other people that put truths on us that are maybe not the same as what we're hearing in our own soul, right? I think it helps today to look back the other direction about when you were the parent and you saw the kid rebelling against you. You remember why your children fought who you were?
Yep. Yeah, my daughter and I had a very noisy adolescence as opposed to mine, which was very quiet. And, you know, I didn't want her to go down a wrong path, and she was occasionally choosing wrong paths and, you know, rebelling against rules and rebelling against my vision of her in a very noisy way. And, you know, it all turned out great. She's a wonderful 40-something-year-old now, but we each had our doubts as to whether. So, but yeah, it's as a parent, you want the best for your children, and you don't want to see them hurt in ways that you can foresee might happen if they continue on the path that they're on. And
and the hard part is that in that saving of them in this path, right? Because I think that's what we think we're doing. I know this path goes directly off the cliff. Let me stop you from doing that.
Yeah.
Which is an appropriate thing, unless, of course, that child's been developing the abilities to build a paraglider where they can jump off the cliff and not be killed, right? Because maybe they have skills and abilities that they're developing that are very different than the ones we have. And so all we see is the crash at the bottom, and they see something very different at that cliff.
One of the things that I just thought of is with my daughter, well, we were very close when she was younger, but when she hit adolescence, suddenly, you know, she didn't want anything to do with me. She was much closer to her dad. But I remember she got into 9th and 10th grade. She got on the track team. She was running track. She had great coaches. And she started really getting very self-disciplined about certain things that we had tried to get her to do, but she just wouldn't hear it from us, but she would hear it from this other person. And sometimes that's, you know, they need other people in their lives that they just are at a stage where they don't want to hear it from you, even though it might be good for them, but they can hear it from someone else.
You know what I call that, Margie?
What?
I call that other mothers.
Yes, I was going to say surrogate parents. Yeah.
We all need other mothers because there are times when we cannot listen to that one in front of us, but we can hear a different person.
Yeah.
And those people are essential to us.
Yeah.
And we can be that essential to some other person's child as well. Our niece, Joni, was convinced she was going to run away at some point or another. And so what she wanted, Kim is our niece's name, she wanted Kim to know that if she did, she could run to us. So she wouldn't just run to whatever was going to be more dangerous, that she had a place to go to. So how did you survive, either as the child or as the parent? What got you from one side to the other? And I mean this not just in those teenage years, but all the other times, because right now, I believe we're going through adolescence in our politics. I'm not certain if I'm the parent or the child right now, right? But somehow we're going through that same type of time, and I need to figure out how to get from one side to the other. So how did you survive those other times like this in your life? Merida did it this way. I want a spell that will change my mom, that will change my fate. Right? And she changed. Sure enough, she changed. And almost changed her fate forever in very damaging ways. So how did you end up changing during that time? What helped you? Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I was just thinking, reminiscing about a woman whose birthday was the same as mine, and she was a family friend, and she was kind of whimsical. And I always thought it was magic for me in the sense that I was just having this wonderful memory of her. Her name was Margaret, and Margaret was both creative. She was loving, kind, kind of giggly.
Uh-huh.
She saw some things in me, and there was that affinity of being a birthday twin with her. And I was thinking about people that, were meaningful, because she gave me another window on the world, and another way to look at myself. And I'm really grateful. She's been dead a long time, because she made up a poem, me 47, when she was 47 and I was 16, and she said, "Lord, the years that lie between." And I always thought about that. So I always could figure out how much older she was than I, but she lived to be a ripe old age, well into her 90s. And I have that fond, loving memory.
Catherine, many of my saving graces in high school were the teachers that showed me something different than just, and my mom and dad were both well-educated individuals. I'm not trying to speak anything against them that way, but these were people that I could see that were speaking in very different ways than what my mom and dad would. And so I could take Miss Finner and see the power in who she was. And she was near the end of her career. She was probably really old, like 50,
Practically ready for the home.
Practically ready. Right? but she provided the voice like your like your other mother that
Yeah.
provided a different space for you, a different hero for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. And I'm so grateful for thinking about her today, and thinking about her in that way, because I think until this moment, I always thought about her in a certain context, and now I have a new way to think about her. So I'm grateful for this conversation, just that I'm getting a new insight about a very old friend and old experience. So wow.
So let me tell you something that was probably true about Miss Finner and most of my teachers. Coach Leonard was another one of my heroes in high school. I'm almost certain that in the current political divide, they're on the other side, because that was rural South Texas, conservative land, right? So they're probably politically very different from me. I can't say that for sure, but can I use that to be able to mend some of the challenges between us today? Because their hearts were really good for me, right? And today, those same hearts, could that heal the distance between us? Remembering those wonderful hearts that were there. Because I think that's at least part of what happened with Merida and her mom, is that even in the guise of the bear, Merida was able to see that which was good about that bear. That which was not just ferocious and scary about her.
Well, I almost feel that the challenge is to learn to love people in not the unreal way that we may start out, but to learn to love the real person, your real mother and father, and other real people as they are, and find that balance between wanting to throw them out with the bathwater and totally wanting to deny everything that is about them because you're trying to differentiate and individuate yourself, and but finding balance in the moment and in the now moment between what was and what really is.
Because the reality is that if you're still treating mom like when you were 8 years old, then you've got a dysfunctional relationship, right? Because mom
and she does too. If there's still one available, yeah, it could be both ways.
That's right. That is not a relationship that is good for either mother or child, father or child. You want to have a better relationship than that. But that means that you've got to figure out how to hear from your mom that she's not going to do it that same way. And you've got to be able to say to mom, I'm not going to do it that way. And sometimes the saying of that damages. So for Merida specifically, it was this thing of, you can't tell me who to marry. I'm not ready for that step right now, especially with one of these three, right? These three are not who I want to choose from. But don't you love it that when they were resolving it, as Merida is standing there in front of all the folks, and mom, the bear, is standing way back in the corner, acting like the statue, as if she's a stuffed bear, and trying to mime to Merida what to say. She said, my mother feels that we should be free to write our own story, that we should be free to fall in love with who we choose. So through this, mom changed from, this is just what we do, to I see the power in you. And so literally, it was mom's voice speaking through Merida to go this new direction. And that meant that both of them had to change. Merida had to hear a new voice from mom, but mom had to change the voice that she was trying to put in Merida. And that's really difficult, isn't it?
But I think it's the key to any relationship.
It is. You're exactly right, Sandy. It's tough because when we have those ideas for what the other person should be. So let's go to our current adolescents. How many have at least an idea of what should happen to some of your political opponents right now? What kind of way would you speak their story differently?
I was actually thinking this morning, I'm not going to do this, but I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny to post something on Facebook encouraging all Trump voters to make sure to get out and vote in person or take hand carry their ballots on election day, November 10th, Tuesday, November 10th.
Oh.
And then I thought, no, not going to go there.
Yeah. The much more difficult thing to do is to try to hear why it is that they are voting with the way they vote. Because I know why they're voting wrong. I got that down in my head really easily. What is it that's right about what they're doing? Why is it that they think it's right, at least? And do we hear that enough? So what are they changing? For example, this was at least in part, and I think much of it was dysfunctional, so I'm not trying to say that's not true. This, at least in part, was a reaction to the Obama administration. What was wrong about the Obama administration for them that it caused us to do
Being
this?
black.
Right? And how do we get into that type of conversation where we deal with some of whatever that fear is? Go ahead, Leticia.
I tend to be in the middle. So I listen to the chatter that goes on, and we ourselves have gotten into a divisive conversation. And I don't talk politics, my own politics. I talk to people to find out what we share in common. And then from there, if they want to know, opinions and stuff, why? Because when I hear my far right friends talk about the leftists, or my left friends talk about the extremists on the right, we're missing everybody else in the middle that's watching this battle going on, and we're not working together.
Mm-hmm. We're missing each other as well, right? Because that person who's the rightist to me is not just that, right? They're much more than just that. But do I take the time to be able to let them be? Do they just see me as their political opponent? Because I'm much more than just that as well. And that's at least part of what Merida and Mom needed to get to. Mom needed to realize this is a girl growing up. Not just growing up, but growing up. And she's not the girl that's only Mom's girl. The frilly girl that Mom wishes she was. She's also all these other amazing things that she is. Right?
Jim, one of the things that struck me, and maybe this comes from my own experience, I mean, I'm sure it does, in the film was that there were times when the mother, the king was kind of such a doofus. And you could kind of see that maybe that wasn't a great match for her. She probably didn't have choice either herself.
Right.
And
likely,
yeah. I was just going to say, yet she took the dutiful path.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't like seeing that in her daughter because you know, there was a part of her maybe that would have recognized it in herself at that age as well. And when I finally was able to kind of really begin communicating with my parents again after, you know, kind of going off my own way in a huff for many years, I think what helped me to come around was to see, particularly with my father, he had been through a little bit of that himself. He went off and went away somewhere out. He was raised in Chicago, and his parents wanted him to go to a particular college. He wanted to go off to U of Minnesota, and he went for a year. And then he came back, and his mother just said, "No, we need you at home. You're staying home." And so then he stayed home and finished in Chicago. But he really, I finally pieced together that he had wanted that, but then got pulled back by his sense of duty to his family. And that was his role. He was the only son in that family. And he was the oldest. He had 3 younger sisters.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the things we have to try to figure out. What is it in that other person? Like Leticia said, what are the things we share? You know, we've all had those moments in our lives, but we can't get past we can't listen to each other somehow, you know?
Yeah. And the difficult part is that if I was the dutiful son who went home, then it's hard for me to understand the rebellious son who stays away.
It's kind of like, well, I did it, so why can't you, kind of.
And
yeah.
vice versa. Yeah. That's exactly right. But I used to jokingly look at couples that were getting married in premarital counseling, and I would say, if you want to know what your spouse is going to be like, then look at their parents, because either they're going to be the same or they're going to be 180 degrees different, right? They're either going to be the dutiful one or they're going to be the rebellious one. And that's not a completely fair thing, but it has a lot of truth to it too. And you have to figure out why it is that one person rebelled and became very different while one other person stayed home, and deal with them through the choices they made.
So maybe,
what?
Sorry.
Go ahead. So I think, like with Merida, what Mom recognized is Merida was a good person. And I think Mom always knows that, but she forgot, because it felt like the taming of the hare was more important than the fiery spirit that Merida was. And yet that fiery spirit is part of what Mom's going to love about Merida, right?
Well, what I was thinking about now is that maybe we can understand the parable of the prodigal son in a new way, with another perspective as well.
I agree. That's at least part of what that is about.
Another thing just for myself, but I think it would help us in this time when there's so much division, is just realizing everybody's doing the best they can. You know, we don't know everybody's story. We're all doing the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that quote from Maya Angelou about, when you know better, do the best you can, and then when you know better, do better.
Yeah, that's
Not
right.
quite, but.
The thing that gets in the way of that, Margie, though, is that in a very real way, we set up the paradigm so we think we do know each other, right? If you think about the political divides, how many have some pretty strong opinions about what the person on the other side of the divide really is, and how they act and why they react the way they do? And you have some strong opinions about that person, which maybe has some merit, but isn't telling the whole story either. So we all base those opinions on merit, but that's not all we base them on.
Well, Jim, up in Montana, where Christy is, so many of the ladies go right along with their husbands, and their husbands listen to Rush Limbaugh and the other guy, and no one else. And so these ladies, like sheep, are just following along.
Yeah.
And it hurts Christy to see that. She doesn't want to talk politics, but she wants them to at least see the other side.
Yeah. And I'm sure they're probably seeing someone like her that is more mindful as being, to some extent, not righteous enough, because she's not listening to her husband as well, right? And it's not that she's not listening, it's that she's also seeing the strength of herself, right? But mom in this story had to figure out that there was nothing of rebellion in Merida, so much as there was an insistence on truly being herself.
Yeah.
Our fate, right at the end, Merida said, our fate lies within us. We only have to be brave enough to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just that I have to be brave enough to see it. It's that I have to help the people around me be brave enough to see it. So I have to be strong enough in holding that this is my truth. At least part of why my mom wanted me to be a lawyer is because she knew that was a profitable profession, right? And that I would have needs taken care of. Teaching, which I went into, is not a profitable profession.
Yeah.
She knew the difficulties, the challenges that would be there with that. And yet that was what was within me. And I had to be brave enough to see it. So when I went to college, I had a couple different majors before I said, no, you know what? I've known since junior high that I was supposed to be a teacher. And I embraced it after a time. But it takes some bravery sometimes to walk the road that's in front of us.
Some quotes that I did several years ago came up on Facebook today, and the one that jumped out at me this morning was from Tova Beta. Real simple. Complaints drain joy. And the way we're having political discussions are not only draining our joy, it's causing all kinds of mean-spirited stuff.
Yep.
And we're not going to advance anything.
And we're forgetting the power of the us in the midst of the something smaller. I was going to say in the midst of the I, but it's not always just that. It's just something smaller than the us, which is what both Merida and mom were forgetting, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the quote Gandhi said about that? Whatever you do in life will be insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. And we forget that because we all want to save the world.
Yeah. But we don't save the world by saving all the world. We save the world by being the best person in our piece of the world, whatever that is. Right? Some people get to run for president. Most of us do not. In fact, in many ways, I think that it's not the person who runs for president who saves the world. It's a whole lot of other people who really do that work. So what helps you to be that?
This is in relation to what Margie said and a couple of things that you said, Jim. A quote that I read a while ago was, when you're interacting with someone that you're having difficulty with, try to see them in the most generous interpretation of their actions, and instead of well, he's doing this because he's a blah, 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 blah. Well, he's doing this, or she, because she cares about children or whatever. You know, it's trying to see things from, like you were saying, why would they be doing that? What can we hear? And we just hope that they're doing the best by, when you don't know somebody's motive, try to be generous in what you think it is.
Thank you. And that's hard when it's as close as what this is. When mom thinks that she has to choose a mate for Merida, and that's an essential, because for mom it was an essential. That's how she moved into secure adulthood, and so she's thinking that's what her daughter needs. So it's hard sometimes to be generous to that person who is saying, I can get there differently than you, mom. And it's hard when we see somebody who seems to be, like, I think I told you about my friend Donna, who is very conservative, and suddenly she starts invoking Martin Luther King, and it was like, you can't invoke him. He belongs to my side of the politics. You can't be inspired by him. And yet, why not? Right? Why can't she, even though it's not, even though she takes it in directions that I wouldn't?
Well, at least she's trying.
Right, and I should not be just insulted by that. When Tim Scott invoked Martin Luther King this week, at his speech, there were things that I wanted to fight against his interpretation. And because it's not my interpretation doesn't mean that it's not a fair interpretation of those words and an inspiring interpretation. Because Tim Scott has done remarkable things for a black man out of South Carolina, unprecedented things, and is changing that state in many ways. Whether or not I agree with his interpretation of my hero.
You know what I told you the other day? I have the same problem when Dr. King is referred to just as a black activist, or Cesar Chavez was a Chicano activist. But they were human rights activists. And if the other side isn't hearing it, they may not be hearing it the same way, but if we're not sharing that, they're not going to learn.
It seems to me that I've long had a Mother Teresa complex that I've worked on overcoming, and meaning that I thought I could help and fix everybody in my life. And what I now try to do is ask myself, is this mine to do? Is this my purpose? Do these people or this person that I'm encountering, do they need my words or my help? Are they asking for it? Or is it my projection? So I find that is helpful when I'm able to invoke that and realize, hey, hallelujah, I don't have to help this person, and I don't have to fix them, and I don't have to do this one.
Yeah.
Because the answer can be no, this one is not for you. Give it to somebody else. Let somebody else fix them.
Yeah. And the reality is you don't have to have everyone's answer, do you?
No.
This morning, as I meet on Wednesday mornings with my mentor, and these days we used to have breakfast. Well, we still have breakfast together. We used to go to a restaurant for it. Now we sit in the park. We watch people run by all the time. You watch people do all kinds of different sports, and and they're doing their trainings right there in front of us, and they do all kinds of things. Like today, one guy was using a parachute to run, right, and to provide resistance to him. Not everyone's training path has to be the same. There's a lot of different training paths going on there. And part of my job is part of our task is to celebrate how that person is being trained You know, what is it that they're trying to make their body into so that they can perform this task? Or what is it that they're trying to make their spirit into in order to be this part of what will save the world? Right? I think mom saw Merida as being just the princess of Dunbrook. Right? Just that. Merida, I think, had very different dreams. What else was she going to do? And do I take the time to see that in her? Or that in my child? Or that in my political opponent? So who's challenging you today is the question. Who is it? Either where someone is your mom that's standing in your path, or your Merida who's running in a different direction. And
Today I'm challenging myself.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing. But the question is how are you going to deal with them? We can turn each other into bears, can't we?
Mm.
And it didn't help. Just throws one more challenge into the mix. But how do we stay in relationship is the real question. And then be able to look at each other and say, Mom, you've changed. And be answered by, we both have. So next week, our movie is also about a young girl about the same age as Merida. And she is growing up in inner city, but also being, also going up to a outer city, a suburban high school. Very bright girl, living in a black neighborhood and being schooled in a white high school, and about the tearing of spirit and soul, the struggle of those two different worlds that she has to live in. It's called The Hate You Give. So watch that this week, and we will have a good time talking about it next week. Has this been okay for you today?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, my friends. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Get well, Margie.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well.